In the mid-1700s, John Donelson's clan, if you will, migrated from the Canadian province down to the eastern coast and settled around, I believe it was South Carolina. They decided to make a settlement there, and from all intensive purposes, Andrew Jackson was settled there too, though his parents had died from the wars. And Andrew Jackson did what a lot of adolescents did, teenagers, if you will, maturity levels of men, no doubt. He joined the campaign and followed the soldiers and fought in the wars and migrated from South Carolina during the wars to what is now Tennessee. And as he did, many of the settlers followed the soldiers as well. And the Donelson clan ended up in Kentucky, somewhere probably around, I would say, Berea, maybe south of there, actually, maybe around Cumberland Gap, and married a man named Roberts. Rachel did. And Rachel was very influential. She was very persuasive. And they were married for a little while. And she became separated from her husband. And they started to live separate lives. And she met a man named Andrew Jackson from Tennessee, who left just as her family had from South Carolina. And the two struck it up, and they became friends. And it wasn't long after that that they became romantically involved. And Mr. Roberts assured Rachel that they had obtained a divorce, and she was free to do what she wanted. So they moved to a fort in Tennessee that became Nashville due to the power of the General Jackson and the political clout and aristocratic money, I'm sure, from the Donelsons. And so as they prospered in Tennessee, Jackson being this Southern general with all this might, Washington, D.C. Called him to duty and sent him to Florida because they were having issues with slave migrations toward Florida, and they were also having issues in Florida with the Spanish who were down there because it was a Spanish settlement. And so Jackson went down there to address things, not forgetting his wars and campaigns with the British, but also taking on the Spanish conquistadors and military as well, and all of the different variables that were down there that were being backed by the Spanish, and at this time now the English from the north following him in to Florida. And there was a lot of trade going on with guns, slaves, and supplies that was irritating Andrew Jackson because it was causing him issues as far as being able to negotiate things, them having firearms as well, to combat them and to fight back and kill his troops was something he wasn't going to tolerate. So he arrested a man, and I believe they called him Big John, but he was one of the King of England's right-hand men, and he was down here for the same reason everyone else was, which was to take Florida. The Spanish wanted to keep Florida, the Native Americans were on the Spanish side of things, and he wasn't going to be outdone by the English. So he arrested him, and took him, I believe it was to Tallahassee, and put him on trial and left. And so they waited trial, and Jackson went on to fight down, in the Panhandle there. I think it was around Ocala, somewhere like that. I could be wrong. But he stopped the war and turned around and came back because he got word that there was going to be some foul play in this trial to make sure not to upset the English from the north, following orders from the king. And so he went back and he found him in court and sat in on the trial, and the judge dismissed the charges. And so Andrew Jackson was irate. He was a man known for his temper. And so he told the judge to stand down. And he walked the prisoner out. And this is the right-hand man of the King of England. And we've just now started to settle things out with England. And shot him. They killed him. And then he walked back in and told the judge that he found him guilty and overrode him. And had the judge, I believe it was the same judge, he had him arrested. And he had done stuff like this his entire life. He was extremely bold. He stood into his convictions. And he believed what he believed was going to be America. And that was all there was to it. There was no negotiating with this man. And so he followed his orders from the President of the United States and went down and collected Florida into the United He was the reason they were accepted into the United States, because he took it from the Spanish, the Native Americans, fed it off the English, and became the mayor of Florida. And when they came down to discuss things with him, he was building boats to go ahead and take Cuba. He was heading out to sea. He took his orders very serious. And so all of the accolades and all of the admiration that people had gained for him, through 1812, the campaign to New Orleans, and other critical wars that he won in the South, to collect it, unify it, had culminated. And they asked him to become the spokesman for Florida in Washington. And then when he moved back to Tennessee, to the Hermitage, they requested that he become president of the United States. He ran against his counterpart. I believe it was Vanderbilt, I can't remember, and won. And so it might have been Adams. But when he won, there was a lot of politics that were played, and my great-great-great-great-grandmother paid the toll because they brought up the fact that she had been married before and destroyed her publicly in the papers and the press by calling her a homewrecker and different things like that. And from all intents and purposes, she died. She perspired from exhaustion, is the way they put it. And it infuriated President Andrew Jackson. And when he made his speech, his inception speech to become president, he took the allotted time and carved out some of it for his raw emotion and said, I will hunt down these savages who have destroyed the name of my love, so much so that she's not here. And I'll kill her. And some tales say that he took 3. They operated, it might have been on Adams' campaign, to smear her name. And they paid the ultimate price. Some of the propaganda tickets out there showed where he was running for president, and he said, if you support him, I'll hang you. And it showed depictions of people being hung in trees, not slaves, aristocrats, paparazzi, supporters of the other side. There wasn't a racial overtone to it. Jackson was a fierce man, and he's the reason that we unified in the South. Really, he's revealed to this day uh, the stories of Andrew Jackson in history classes. It doesn't take long until you're riveted to learn more about him. Because he really did. He went through and took the South of the United States and was responsible for everything all the way to the Mexican border being taken to unify the states and to bring democracy, modern democracy, to the table, to bring aboard a classism of people unified together, negotiating things uh, uh, until they were worked out for the benefit of the entirety. And those days and times are past. We don't know what it was like to be a frontiersman, to face Indians who were hostile compared to Indians who were not, to be attacked as the uh, hillbillies, if you will, that the Scottish were, uh, who broke away from the parliamentary style life that was planned out by George Washington and some of the others, trying to copy the English way of life. When the Irish and the Scottish, there was many people there, and most of them were outlaws. They didn't want to live that way, and all of it spilled over and culminated into the land sharing and sharecropping of the landlords and serfs of Old England, which were the white version of slaves. The landlords owned the land, and the serfs worked the land for next to nothing. We've all heard the stories about the Irish only surviving because of the potato, because the kings and the landowners wouldn't share the plethora of meat and vegetables and things like that with him, because they looked down on them as the workers. And there's always been a tiff between the English and the Irish and Scottish and the rest because of the way that they governed, the way that they did things. And I think that when you look at the entire life of Andrew Jackson, you can actually see democracy develop, which is an in-between between the English way and the Irish. It's an interesting story.